Miss me with that bullshit.
You're not a gang member, you're a tourist. I be blacking now, I be blacking.
Welcome to another episode of Niggas Eatin, a tastefully offensive podcast with your host, Rory and
Temi. Hey, Rory. What you eating?
Theraflu. What have you eaten today, Temi?
I made a little breakfast rice bowl. Yeah, it's got some rice and a little omelet with some curry and turmeric and mushrooms and peppers. Pretty good.
So, what is on the menu for today?
You want to run down the menu?
We could run down the menu.
Cool. Well, for an appetizer, we're going to talk about Afrofuturism. And for the main course, we're going to review Black Panther.
Marvel's big tentpole budget, Black History Month savior.
Blackest black Marvel film ever.
No, film ever. There's never been a film that's blacker than Black Panther.
This is the blackest film
ever made. And
ever made.
Be made ever in the history of the world again.
There will be no darker film than this.
Like maybe Black Panther 2, Chala at midnight.
Like the bread. Be some good like French toast at midnight. Cool. And then for dessert, we're talking about the New York Times 28 films for 28 days of Black History Month.
But specifically, the Ben Carson of film criticism, Armand White's response to the 28 black films you should watch during Black History Month.
It's going to be a pretty good show.
Great. So let's get into the appetizer.
Afrofuturism. It's pretty cool. Usually people think of it as cool, colored looking black people in astronaut suits.
As opposed to uncolored black people?
No, I mean like the color palette is cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
not the color of their skin, but the color around them. So, you know, like purples and teals and shit versus just like empty, dreary spaceship.
So Afrofuturism was first coined by Mark Duray in 1994 in his article Black to the Future. And there's been subsequent discourse from Alondra Nelson and what's his name? Kodo Eshun, but originally it comes from 1994 and it's developed since then, even though retroactively we can look to people like Sun Ra or Paramount Funkadelic as being Afrofuturists before the phenomenon was actually coined.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now in a new wave of black cinema, an artist, Martine Sims, wrote the Mundane Afrofuturist Manifesto, which more or less counters some of the ideas from, you know, the originators and the people who coined the term Afrofuturism. So I'm just going to read the first paragraph of what it is. She says, the undersigned, being alternately pissed off and bored, need a means of speculation and asserting a different set of values which to reimagine the future. In looking for a new framework for black diasporic artistic production, we are temporarily united in the following actions. And she goes on to say that basically a lot of the tropes of Afrofuturism, of ubiquitous, faster than light travel and, you know, out of this world mutated characters and using the metaphor of space travel, like long-term space travel, as synonymous with the Middle Passage. She aims to counter those or shatter those. And to essentially sum it up, it's that, you know, if we limit ourselves to thinking where we're at right now with the resources we have available on Earth, as humanity, black, white, whatever, our parameters are most limited to either inter-solar system travel and finding out how to mitigate the destruction of our planet, because that's all we have, rather than to think of some Deus Ex machine or alien that will come and, you know, save us, or some way to just magically be able to move across space and time.
Because I think Alondra Nelson had where you would imagine a utopic future. I think I don't know what article that was, but I remember. I think it was something that was written. I know it's something written by them, but I don't know where I found it.
Yeah.
Because we do plenty of research for this podcast.
Right.
But
somewhere on the internet.
Yeah, so a lot of it is imagining in a utopic future. But what you're saying in the mundane Afrofuturist manifesto, it's we shouldn't imagine, like you said, the Deus Ex Machina, like in 2059 when, you know, we're on Jupiter, one of the moons of Jupiter or whatever. It's the destruction of the planet is happening now, so we need to imagine the future for this planet, almost.
Yes.
Cool. Because I know, well, you mentioned something about space travel and the
Middle Passage.
The Middle Passage. Do you know specifically why she's trying to counter that? Because that's like has always been one of the central like Kodwo Eshun talks about that all the time, where it's like, especially in his further consideration of Afrofuturism. So we do our research sometimes, but the slave ship being a spaceship is something that
trope,
that has been like seminal to Afrofuturism. So do you know why
she doesn't? I mean, besides the bullet point of not making that association, she doesn't go deeper into that. But I think it's because, as the manifesto itself, it's just meant as guidelines to think outside of the conventions that we've established. And ultimately, by the end of the manifesto, she says also to not let the mundane Afrofuturism cramp their style as if it could, and to burn this manifesto as soon as it gets boring. So like, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's also understanding that any set of rules at some point will become outdated or antiquated.
And if Afrofuturism is supposed to be about the future, then it can't be antiquated. But I'm really trying to like sit with the notion of the future in the Afrofuture, because I know, going back to slavery, like at the end of, for example, Our Prison's Obsolete, Angela Davis talking about and calling for the abolition of prison. And one of the things that, especially she says in the epilogue, is people have this, not depression, but this very myopic view of the end of prison, because it's so integrated and ingrained in our society. And she makes the argument that in 1864, no slave thought that slavery could end. Like, especially the next year, in the coming months. But the reality was that slavery is so ingrained into this society, how could it possibly end?
Right.
And then it ended.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's a very hopeful sentiment, especially, like, because you do have that historical precedent. So...
Yeah. Well, it's a good point to consider that nobody can really look around the corner into the future. Everybody speculates, but you don't know till you get there.
Right.
And there's always, short of miracles, of just situations that can occur to advance things.
Right.
But I don't know. I was drawn to some of the points that she made just for
she meaning
Sims, sorry,
okay.
Martine Sims, because I'm definitely one to think of Afrofuturism and just sci-fi as a galaxy far away, through a wormhole.
The Cloverfield paradox
Sure.
is Afrofuturistic because it has black people in it.
Right, but at the same time, it deals with time travel and like space displacement, which are something that we should think not even beyond of, but like, okay, in some ways it seems like it's saying let's be more grounded in what the future is, because if you think about it, 25 years ago, there were cell phones, they were not ubiquitous, and they were cumbersome, expensive, and for the elites. So most people would use a payphone, and now today to see a payphone is like, look at this relic in time. It's like seeing a rotary phone, which is like a cute
little, people have it for their like throwbacks.
Sure.
And
and even at this point, it's cute to see old cell phones. So in that same way,
Razor.
Sidekick. So how our perception of what is futuristic can become really condensed very quickly,
So we talked about Sun Ra, Paramount Funkadelic in terms of music, but artists like Janelle Monáe and her alter ego, Cindy Mayweather, being this android from the future who's based off of Metropolis, the robot in Metropolis, where in Metropolis, the robot bridges the gap between the haves and have-nots in some bullshit movie way. but Cindy Mayweather's bridging because she's a cyborg, she's bridging humans and robots. And the robots are stand-ins for the dispossessed, whether it's in terms of class or race or gender, sexuality, and the humans who are the stereotypical, I guess, white straight men in this analogy. And she's supposed to bridge them, which, we can get into, not in today's episode, but like Missy Elliott. Missy Elliott's, I think, my favorite Afrofuturist because she's just fucking bonkers. Like, her visuals are always like amazing, and it's Sock It to Him.
Yeah.
That, like, where she's like the fucking robot, and she's just like flying around and stuff. That was so great to watch.
Missy Elliott is a rocket socking robot.
Yes. But it moves. So Afrofuturism is like, I guess what we're saying is it's not just music. It's like everywhere.
Yeah.
So like Samuel R. Delany and Octavia Butler are novelists. Basquiat as an artist. Renee Cox, who's a photographer, Jamaican American photographer. Arthur Jaffa, filmmaker, and Nick Cave, who does these sound suits. And so it's like an art piece, but it's also fashion. And like the materials that he uses, when like you move, it makes different sonic sounds. And so bringing sound to fashion. And I remember in Florida, he had a showing of some of his works, and it was actually really amazing.
Oh, cool.
But Arthur Jaffa and Sun Ra, especially in Space is the Place, have this concept that black people are aliens.
Yeah, which Sims also refutes that,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because it's interesting in this moment, like, for example, even though this wouldn't be an Afrofuturist work, The Shape of Water, right? At the Directors Roundtable for the DGA. Nope, it was either for the DGA or for the Hollywood Reporter. One of those two. I can't remember. I watched them back to back. But Guillermo was like, I made this film specifically because we have the fear of the other meaning the monster, or the generic stand-in of the Cloverfield monster, which AJ uses. He appropriates the images of the Cloverfield monster to stand in for black people. And Guillermo del Toro's point was, we can have sympathy for this quote-unquote monster because we see the other as a monster, but it's not actually like the monster is supposed to, like Frankenstein is, as a classic example, is more human, quote-unquote, whatever the fuck that means, than the people who try to burn him and attack him. He has more humility and sympathy and
compassion.
Right, and that's the same thing with
The Shape of Water.
I'm assuming that's what happens in The Shape of Water.
Yeah.
And I think AJ made the point that the Cloverfield monster is just, he's black. He's having fun, doing his own shit, and the white people don't like him doing his own shit. He can't stand on the stoop.
Interesting.
But I think that trope is getting old, and it's definitely of another generation where it's like you're tired of seeing yourself as a fucking monster. And even though AJ, oh God, I coined this. What was it called? It was, Black Inverse Montage.
For AJ's work. For
AJ's work in Love is a Message, the Message is Death. Where you'll see, so it's intellectual montage, so Eisenstein, so if I have if I intercut a cow being slaughtered with workers being slaughtered, you understand that this is the plight of the workers. They're treated like cattle and, just whatever. But inverse is like Michael Jackson's Bad. You know what I mean? Bad isn't terrible.
Yeah.
Bad is cool. It's, yeah.
Yeah, it's
that. So he takes images where somebody's is being knocked down by the police or something like that. And he match on action so it looks like somebody's death dropping, like at a Vogue ball or something like that. And so he'll do stuff like that, but with the Cloverfield monster as well, where you see, I think, I try not to watch police shooting videos, so I have absolutely no idea who was shot.
Probably
by
the one
whom.
in New Orleans.
But he
in
used,
North Carolina where he's running away.
yeah, in the tree. Yeah. He uses that video footage and then matches the impact of the bullet with the Cloverfield monster. And I have my thing about using police footage, but nevertheless, like that impulse of like literally equating him with a monster is just like, so.
Right. So, I mean, it is something that, hopefully artists can consider to move out of because they are established. So ultimately, it's a way to push the boundaries of what not only is acceptable in art, but what you can think of and how to solve problems. Because that is, I would say, part of the point. The passion to explore and to create and also to solve the problem of,
Right.
Injustice, racial brutality,
So, Afrofuturism is a cross-genre cultural phenomenon. Everybody that I listed has relationship to the United States. Is it diasporic? Because I'm not up on
It is,
Afrofuturism.
and I lost my copy of a book that actually, I forgot the woman who wrote it, but it was a compendium of African writers as well. And I also had another book of short stories.
Yeah.
It was African sci-fi future writers.
Because my understanding of Afrofuturism was kind of like maybe jazz, where like the syncopated rhythms might come from the mother country or whatever. Like the textiles or the stories could come from the mother country. Like you might have an Anansi, character in your story or whatever, but it's an American phenomenon.
Right. That I think it's like a echo chamber or callback. So African Americans trying to understand something better reach out to the motherland. The motherland gives them inspiration, which then, as African Americans pitch that out to the world, it's then reconstituted and remixed.
So, so then Afrofuturism, cross-genre, diasporic, but the Afro part is like, because I don't think you could call Cloverfield. I mean, I guess there's like levels to it, and I guess that's.
I don't think you can call it Afrofuturistic.
See, because I was going to make the argument, not that I'm just throwing this out there for discussion, not that I believe that it's Afrofuturist too, but it's kind of like people wanting like a Black James Bond, but he has the same upbringing, so it's like, it's not really, it's like Shaft. Shaft was originally written as a white cop, but the producers saw the power of blaxploitation, especially after Sweetback's badass song, so they just painted him black. And so like that's what I feel about Cloverfield Paradox. Was like they might have been written as black, but it's just like there's nothing distinctively
right. Besides that, the actors portraying the characters are black. Yeah.
As opposed to the main course, Black Panther.
Black Panther. We're going to talk about that. Let's take a quick break and come back to it.
My son, it is your time.
Show me my respect and bow down.
You get to decide what kind of king you are going to be. Don't freeze.
I never freeze.
And we're back, and we're on to our main course where we're going to talk about Marvel's Black Panther.
Disney's Marvel's Black Panther. But, so we're going to split this discussion up into two pieces. The first is going to be the actual review, which is going to be as generic as possible and spoiler free, and then we're going to get into the sort of political minutia of the film.
I wonder who's talking about that.
Me, which will have spoilers because I can't talk about what needs to be talked about without talking about what happened in the movie. So the official synopsis from Marvel's website for Black Panther is T'Challa, who, after the death of his father, the King of Wakanda, returns home to the isolated, technologically advanced African nation to succeed the throne and take his rightful place as king. But when a powerful old enemy appears, T'Challa's mettle as king and Black Panther is tested when he is drawn into a formidable conflict that puts the fate of Wakanda and the entire world at risk. Faced with treachery and danger, the young king must rally his allies and we'll talk about his allies, and release the full power of the Black Panther to defeat his foes and secure the safety of his people and their way of life. And it stars a bunch of niggas, and
Wow.
It's directed by Ryan Coogler, who is the most Oakland has to offer.
So that's what he said. First of all, that is a long synopsis.
Yeah.
But it's accurate.
Well, I mean, it is a corporate, like, commercial film machine. Of course, it's going to be accurate.
I'll still take that Marvel money. Anyway, so this movie,
It was a movie that people made with upwards of $200 million.
yeah, that's probably with advertising.
Yeah.
It's maybe like 120, 150 for
Yeah.
the film. And it shows, you know. I would even argue it's probably the first Marvel film with a female director of photography. The Oscar-nominated
I mean, that's not really
Rachel
like an
Morrison.
argument. That's more like a fact.
I mean, nobody's bringing it up. Like,
I saw somebody bring it up.
Okay,
I did
okay.
see somebody bring it up. Like,
You know.
Ryan Coogler, because this is the, you know.
third time they've worked together.
No, because this is the identitarian movie. Like, this has to be, you know, might as well throw in Rachel Morrison. Who's white, by the way. Couldn't get Kira Kelly. She was too busy shooting Queen Sugar.
So this was a Marvel film. You know, it's based off a big comic book property.
Yep.
The hero, T'Challa, Black Panther, is the king of Wakanda, the most advanced nation on the planet, with
This was all said in the synopsis.
a reserve of vibranium, the most powerful metal on the planet, that gives them their powers.
They use that shit for everything. They put it in their coffee.
Tea.
They put it
Eyeliner,
their medicine,
shoes.
everything. So in terms of story, and you know how much I love story, because I love story so much. This was exactly what Cloverfield Paradox needed to do. Like when we talked about how there was no weight to Cloverfield Paradox, but they kept bringing up those props. So those props had weight. Everything that you see in this film, from the opening image, is referenced again. So there's literally like not a hair, not a stitch out of place in terms of the development of the narrative. Like some offhand comment about this technology, vibranium, in terms of a train, is
A major point and
in the
callback
yeah.
a couple times in the film.
Right, and like it's not even like referenced again. It's referenced like again and again.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like we said, one time it's a mistake, two times it's a coincidence, three times it's important.
Even peripheral
So
characters
are
in
come
short
back.
scenes.
Yeah, come back to have like more and a more media role. So like you might see somebody like, you know, sweeping dirt or some shit.
Right.
And they don't have dirt in Wakanda. What are we talking? It's
Yeah,
like
it's the cleanest-
literally
it's also the
like
cleanest country
it's
on the
like
planet.
all like sheen and whatever. But somebody's, you know, wiping a window and then they come back and they're
Right.
just like important again. But it reminds me of a Christopher Nolan film
Okay.
in that it's so hyper linear. Like everything is built upon everything else and it's so clean, but it's boring because of that. And I think with this film particularly,
Nolan's film is boring, or Black Panther.
both,
Okay.
because it's so hyper linear, you know exactly what's going to happen. Especially like there was a point in the film where it was obvious that like whatever his name was, the monomyth guy, the hero's journey guy, whatever his name is again,
Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell. I was like, this is just like, here's the descent into hell, here's the gathering of the allies, here's the mentor, here's the rebirth, and all of that. It's just like, Jesus Christ. Like, so it's a very stock film, is what I'm trying to say.
I would counter that. While the structure of how you develop a hero's journey story is definitely in there,
But obviously so.
I don't think it's as obvious, at least for the first half, I would say. And you'll see it, like, whenever you see it, figure it out. Where I think there's a point that leads up where it's not like every other Marvel film, it's not a purely origin story where they fight a bad guy at the end and then move on and set up for a sequel. And it's also not just throwing you into a random world and just saying, and just letting you figure it out. So I think it balanced that really well with a couple things that it did in terms of its introduction and its first couple scenes that do later, really complete like the cycle of the hero's journey. But I would say that it's not that it's unconventional, but that within its convention, it's still fresh and really engaging. And then somewhere, I would say in the halfway point or a little past the halfway point, it becomes very conventional, where, predictable in the sense that what's going to come next because it has to. Now, that being said, regardless of all you said, it's still really great to see a bunch of awesome black actors on screen having a lot of fucking fun.
Okay. The CGI looked, and I don't know if it was because we watched it in IMAX, but you could tell that shit was fake as hell. And it's like, obviously it's fake because, of course, it's going to be fake because Wakanda doesn't exist. But
what is fake? What specifically?
Well, a lot of the background. So like they throw the background out of focus, and it just, you don't have like that whatever, like when you have bad CG and people are moving and it has like that weird.
You can see the edges.
The edges. It doesn't have that. It's like the lighting doesn't match. Okay. Is what I think it is. Like they don't look like they're separated from the background. Is I think the major point, because we know shit about CGI, very little.
Yeah.
But I do know that you can map onto your background plates the lens distortion. So like so if you're using like Cook anamorphic and like the 75, you can map that distortion onto your background. So it matches what it is, right? And Brad was telling us about in Arrival how he had to take very detailed notes about the focal lengths. So if his focus wheel is at 10 feet, all of the CG elements that are being built into the film reflect that 10 feet. And so like anything outside of that range of focus is out of focus, and how much out of focus it is. So like I know they know how to do that because it's a fucking Disney Marvel film, but it just felt fake. When he's sitting with Lupita Nyong'o and they're having like a discussion in the meadow, it's kind of like, why couldn't you just put some fucking grass there?
Okay, so some of it you didn't agree with and you didn't like it. Well, you should go talk to all of those visual effects houses and tell them, hey man, do a better fucking job. Well,
I mean, if it's $120 million film just to make the film, plus an extra $80 million for advertising, whatever, it's a fucking expensive film, and it's just like, you should do better. If Disney is top of the line and they can just throw money at shit, it should look better, because that money could go to feeding children and providing homes for homeless people, and that's the CG that they want to get away with.
I will say this in terms of, for I guess a noticeable like look of artificiality in a film, that probably I feel like has more to do with the fact that this film has a lot of environmental shots, outdoor like high key shots. So I think a lot of the time with sci-fi films with heavy CGI, it's something that's in space, so it's very dark. Yeah. So you can get away with, when you comp stuff out or green screen stuff, you're not going to see anything because it's all supposed to be dark. So in terms of the defense of that, I would say just because it's fucking Africa and it's bright. So.
It's Georgia.
Clearly, we're both on opposite sides of what this movie is.
It was a solid movie. In terms of movie making, it was a movie that was safe. It wasn't like Deadpool, and I understand it couldn't be like Deadpool, but like Deadpool at least had some risk to it. This movie was safe. It was completely like, even in terms of, because I've seen some of the other Marvel films, some of their films, they don't even make fucking sense in terms of a story. Like, it's just random shit happening. That would have been more interesting than, let's take the most stereotypical Hollywood cookie cutter outline of a story and just paint it black.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, this is boring to watch. Some of the action sequences were really good. The car chase scene I thought was done well.
Yeah.
The Battle of the Planes, I couldn't tell if it was like the Phantom Menace with the droids versus the Gungans.
Wow.
Or
fuck you.
Lord of the Rings when they're fighting in the meadow.
Wow. Fuck
the
you.
planes
It was
of the,
not that.
At some points it was that dumb. But it was good.
So
I'm
Rory,
trying to...
now that you have totally exposed yourself as someone who hates all black films, especially black
Who said that?
Marvel films, Disney films, movies with budgets, and movies that use special effects and don't make a one-to-one real fucking transition of CGI, how'd you feel about the acting?
Okay, well, here's the thing.
Letitia Wright is everything in this film. She's great. She plays the
She's not everything.
Yeah.
She's 99.9%. And the reason why she's 99.9% is because
You're a hater.
they had...
Hater.
Some of the lines are just
Freaking all the haterade.
stupid. Some of the lines are stupid.
the haterade.
One of her lines was a reference to a Vine that came out in 2014.
She did do that.
And it's just like, not even she could sell that line because it's so outdated. And how am I supposed to believe this African fake country that is so technologically advanced that they weren't the ones who created that Vine and it's 2018 and they're still referencing that outdated Vine 4 years later? That was just absolutely atrocious to me. It was really like, they really did that. And there were other lines of dialogue too, where there's and I can't believe I'm going to say this, a Wakandan American talking about how he wishes to be buried like the brave ancestors who crossed the Middle Passage, and he wants to be buried in the water because of his brave. And it's like, oh my god.
You didn't like that line?
No. You sighed too. I heard you sigh during that line. You 100% sighed, and I looked at you and I was like, he gets it.
I may have cleared my throat a little bit.
And are we really fucking doing this? Yeah.
Which is to say, I mean, here's what it is. My whole defense is almost like the people, that's where yeah. But it's just an emotional thing. Mm-hmm. Which isn't the best way to review things.
And you can have an emotional response to a movie, that's fine, but that's getting into the second part of like why it's an emotional thing. Mm-hmm. And that's in the second part of this main course where we talk about the politics of it, because they want that response.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I will say this about the performances. I appreciated everybody in that movie.
Oh yeah, everybody was good.
And I wasn't so offended by the African accents, because it was more...
You have to tell the truth.
Yo, Will Smith still has the worst fucking African accent ever recorded.
Oh, man.
Ever recorded.
But no, what's his name? Gollum from the movie?
Andy Serkis.
He does not look like Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
He was good. The little mousy CIA agent was a mousy CIA
Tim
agent.
Freeman from the British
Martin
Office.
Freeman.
Whatever.
Not Tim.
Well, his name is
Get your
Tim
white people.
in The Office. So
Is it?
that's
Okay.
fine. So he's Tim from The Office, all right?
I will say, Michael B. Jordan, he might like to fuck white women. He might not pine for the black women. But in this movie, I would slob the fuck out of his knob. I would suck all his babies out his testicles.
You done? You good?
I could go on, but I feel like you don't want me to.
Yeah, I don't.
He was really cute and hot and sexy.
His costume was dope.
And when he took his costume off, it was even more dope.
I actually wondered how long that took to do
Yeah.
that effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was a solid film in terms of how generic films, work.
Yeah. I personally just, because it's a big movie, nowadays on big tentpole releases, in the marketing plan, the media that they show you usually gives you a little too much of the movie's plot points or even like the fun bits. So I usually kind of black out like a month or a month and a half before a film, and I don't want to watch any trailers or read any advanced anything about it. And I'm glad I did that with this film, because it allowed me to come into it and enjoy the ride of a big action hero film that ties into a bigger ensemble action hero, superhero ensemble. So the hype that everybody is feeling, I'm adjacent to it in the way that, yes, I'm excited for it, but I don't want to invest too much into it, because I did that with The Dark Tower.
And you were disappointed.
And my heart was shattered.
Yeah. But Ryan Coogler is a good director.
Yeah.
His team was solid, and he had Disney behind him, so it was very unlikely. If they made Ant-Man work, you know what I mean? Didn't that do well?
It did okay.
Okay.
I mean, enough to make a second one.
Right. I don't think this movie could not have been bad in terms of entertainment, enjoyability, and all of this. Because there were moments when I was just like, okay, I vibe with this, like it's happening, like I know exactly what's happening, but it's cool to see him, do trick flips in the air and, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was ultimately
let's not forget that this is a comic book film. So get your life from it if you need to, but remember that it's just a
comic
movie,
book film. Yeah.
And it's a comic book film, and the fictitious world of Wakanda cannot save us, but it can inspire us to do better.
You are pulling the shit out of your ass.
Yeah, I am.
So
I said do better with like a, I guess. I don't know. I didn't feel that way.
Afrofuturism.
Hang on. No, I didn't feel that way, but I think that a lot of people will. So
they think this is like the second coming of Dr. King.
Right.
Some of these people, which is part 2 of our conversation.
Yeah, so let's take another break and come back to that.
Do you have anything else to say about it? Do you want to gas it up a little bit more?
No, let's just...
Okay.
Really?
What?
You had to fucking ruin the out.
I waited my entire life for this. The world's gonna start over. I'ma burn it all.
What happens now determines what happens to the rest of the world.
Warning, the following part of this conversation has spoilers, so please skip ahead to 108. Thank you.
And we are back with our second half of the Black Panther review, which will contain spoilers, but we're talking about the political implications of this film. And we're starting off by the black overhype of this film.
And its reaction from white boys.
Yeah. I know you were like not following the hype train.
Yeah.
But in terms of black people, but you like felt it.
Oh, yeah. There's no way you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you were feeling in the
just,
ether?
you'd see tweets and posts and stuff like, oh man, get ready. We got 14 more days till our minds
But that's
are
any
blown.
film. Like, that's a Harry Potter film. That's a Star Wars film. But like this...
Or like what Black Panther means to me.
Yes. That shit is just like, it's a fucking movie made by Disney.
But it also shows the power of movies. And not to say Disney is playing the black card and really pitching it to make more money. It's it's now, what is it, the most...
Well, I don't think that was one of their marketing campaigns.
Not specifically, but they're still using it.
Of course.
In the same way that once the advanced screen, in December, it was like the highest grossing pre-advanced screening tickets in history or of a comic book movie.
Yeah.
And you could not go past a black person who was like, we're doing this, we did this.
Right.
And it definitely started with a really great teaser trailer last May during the NBA Finals. And it was...
And of course it was premiered in the NBA Finals.
Well, yeah, it does.
No, I know.
Yeah.
It's Disney.
The same way, if you have a bad film and you need to get it somewhere, what do? You sell it to Netflix.
Yep.
Put a 30-second trailer from a different movie up in front of the Super Bowl, and boom, you got your numbers.
But okay, so yeah, there was the what Black Panther means to me, and all of this nonsense. But people were really like, this is going to be the best movie. This is going to be and it's just like, you haven't seen it, so you can't know if it's going to be the best movie. These are grown-ass people talking about the importance of a fucking Disney movie. And so much so that they've revised the entire history of black superheroes, that this is the first black superhero movie ever made.
Right.
And it's like, there have been, I mean, Blade is the obvious stand-in example.
Yeah.
But there have been black superheroes on TV.
Up and away!
On TV and in the movies, you know, since like the 80s. Probably you could probably even find them in like the 70s or some shit. But since like the 80s, whether it's cross genres, like comedy, you know, like action flick.
Because those are sort of heroes if you think about it, like action movie stars.
Yeah.
You know.
They might not be like the super, but I'm talking about like Blade is like a action movie.
He's an action movie, but he is a
right.
Well, he's a comic book hero.
And Hancock is kind of like the.
But was it good though?
But it doesn't matter.
That's true.
In terms of like, because black people have this obsession with like being the first, and like to retroactively change history to make this the first black superhero movie. It's kind of stupid. I get it. It probably has the biggest budget, has probably the biggest media campaign behind it, but because of this overhype and by misclaiming that it's the first black superhero movie, a lot of, I think, not Variety. No, I think it was Variety. Variety posted something about the first black superhero movie, and then alt-right crybaby Ben Shapiro took it and he listed a whole bunch of black superhero movies, and I started noticing a trend of white conservatives using representation matters, and I don't give a fuck about representation matters. I think, and this is what part of this whole segment is going to be about in terms of media literacy. I think media literacy is more important at this moment as opposed to representation matters. But so he's taking representation matters, and some of the conservatives are taking representation matters, and just like, this is what black people do. Black people will completely forget about other shit, and they'll hype this up. So they don't even know their own history. So when they're talking about, you know, all of these political things in terms of Trump is being racist or the police are being racist or anything like that, that's not what's going on, because, do you get what I'm saying? Right. They're using this as an example to extrapolate what black people do or don't do in terms of the wider political conversations.
Sure.
And it's not up to black people to police themselves to white people in terms of that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But it's interesting to see the white response and to see how the overhype of this film is fueling
a reaction that is trying to point out a broader idea of how black people represent themselves. Because
the most of the discourse that I've seen in terms of white people in regards to this movie is that Facebook group that was shut down. That's, we're gonna just do, but we're gonna, you know, give it all ones or half stars.
The one that, they were gonna.
But the more interesting conversation, I think, is how white people are using this in terms of political opportunism, and what's happening on Twitter, and I've seen this in a couple of reviews on Letterboxd, is two hashtags. One is Black Panther is an alt-right movie, and the other one is Make Wakanda Great Again.
Black Panther is an alt-right movie?
Yes. So what is Wakanda? Wakanda is an ethno-state.
Yeah.
Right? It has a very strong border, right? Very strong military, isolationist, right? That is exactly what Trump is calling for. And so what these hashtags are doing, and that's in the comic books, and that's definitely in the movie as well, because the movies are based off the comic books. At the end of the movie, there's like this weird thing that happens where it's like not as isolationist anymore. But nevertheless, white people, specifically the alt-right, is taking this and saying, this is what we have been calling for. We have been calling for an ethno-state with a strong border, with the wall that's isolationist. Leave us alone. We want our own culture, to preserve our own culture and family and history. But you guys are saying it's okay in this context, but not in our context. So if you think that an ethno-state, it's like how the Nation of Islam back in the day, they were separatists. Mm-hmm. You know, at a certain point they were separatists. And so they agreed a lot with like the KKK and other white separatist groups. And they're just like, that argument is coming up again. You say look at how beautiful Africa could be without white people. Fine, we don't want to touch your fucking dark blacky continent. Go back over there, leave us alone here in America and in Europe, and then you go have your fanciful, technologically advanced whatever. This is exactly what we've been calling for. And why is it okay in this context but not in our context?
Because Black Panther is a fictional comic book written in the 1960s by two Jewish white men.
Right, but you understand how
understand
like you extrapolate from
absolutely.
the right.
But you know,
no, I get what you're saying though.
It's not real. That's
I understand that. But
yes, so for Black people to get hyped about that and to support that idea of an ethno-state because it's fictional and it's with a superhero and it's black in Africa, great. But the chances of that happening are non-existent.
Because the thing that white nationalists don't understand is that Europe, especially fucking Europe, could not survive without Africa. So Europe could never be isolationist or separatist. And America gets a lot of its shit from the continent as well. Mm-hmm. And so their economies would be completely, in some cases, if not crippled, like wouldn't be as strong if they didn't take resources from Africa. Like iPhones, there's like some metal in all smartphones that come, I think, from Central Africa.
Mm-hmm. That's why China is is heavily invested in. But even in that way, they only invest so that they can continue to mine.
Exactly.
You know, they promise to
reinvest it or whatever, but it's not going to happen.
But usually, they bring in their contractors. Mm-hmm. They set up their own.
They might build a hut and then they leave.
And they call it.
Yeah. But so the idea of separatism generally just doesn't happen.
Really. Yeah.
But what I'm most interested in terms of the political implications of this, is the CIA's involvement with the film. And we know that anytime the military is involved in a movie, so like in Transformers, they had like Navy SEALs, right? There's an office in the Navy that deals specifically with films, to give them training, to give them equipment, and they have final say over script and cut.
The Navy does?
In a lot of cases, the Navy, the Army, the CIA, the FBI, they all do it. I'm just using Transformers specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're investing this as American propaganda.
Yeah.
But if the Navy comes off as villainous or as, that goes counter to what they're doing. Right? So that's why they have final cut. Mm-hmm. I mean, scenes that don't involve the Navy or anything like that, they don't really care about.
I got you.
But there are a couple of books, and I'll pull them up. I have some of them. I can't remember the names off the top of my head. But it's like the CIA in Hollywood and stuff like that. Mm. Generic names, but nevertheless. That details how involved the American intelligence agencies and the armed forces are. Mm-hmm. I know that it started in World War II. It probably happened before that, but with World War II, specifically around black people, World War I, black people came back from the war, black soldiers came back from the war, and they were treated like shit. So when World War II is gearing up, their sons, nephews, whoever, brothers, if they were younger, were just like, don't do that, because when you come back, you're going to be treated like shit. And in order to bolster the black support for the film, for the war, the Office of War Information, which later turned into the CIA at the end of World War II, did a film called The Negro Soldier, which is about you should join because you're black and you support the no. But more specifically, the most stereotypical auteur controlling director, Alfred Hitchcock, had a script by John Steinbeck called Lifeboat. And in Lifeboat, the Office of War Information forced Hitchcock to add a black character into the film so that they could bolster support for the black support of the war. Wow. So since then, in everything, like Pitch Perfect 3, they go on a USO tour. Like the girls who are singing that little whatever, they go on a USO tour. And there was heavy involvement from the armed forces in the development and the cut of that film.
Did not know that.
Yes. So it's like, it's not just Transformers and Independence Day, it's in your comedies as well. Like, it's everywhere.
Okay.
And so, because the CIA is specifically named in this, right, the CIA is involved in this project. Anytime you mention the Navy is involved in the project. Anytime you mention the Army, it's involved in the project. So, with the fictional government thing, S.H.I.E.L.D., in the Marvel Universe, it's most likely, I'm not that familiar with it, but it's most likely a stand-in for U.S. intelligence agencies. Yeah. But specifically the CIA is mentioned in this film, and that's the Martin Freeman character named Agent Ross or whatever. And what I think this is the CIA using, again, representation matters. Look at all these black people, because we're not at a point in terms of, again, media literacy, where if we see something black, we're just going to, yes, that's 100, woohoo, yay, black people. But we aren't at the point where people know that this is propaganda, because the Army and the intelligence agency have this history of influencing our movies. But because we're not at that point, they can get the sheen of dark-skinned black people and black superhero and black director and writers and all of this to rehabilitate their image with regard to Africa. And to see T'Challa say, yeah, you can blow up my people who are, insurrectionaries, right? Yeah, blow up you take this spaceship, you can take our spaceship, and you can blow up our people, right? With the vibranium that's leaving the country. And he's like, yes, because we know that Martin Freeman, the CIA guy, might be in like this remote-controlled spacecraft, but we see Wakandans run to the spaceships, and so they're in the spaceships. So he's like, yeah, shoot down my people. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that is just fucking mind-blowing to me. Right? And especially because the CIA, assassinated Lumumba. They're the reason why Nelson Mandela was arrested. They were the ones who tipped off the South African government. And it's interesting that yesterday was the 27th anniversary of Mandela's release when we watched the film. Yeah, so that's Sunday the 11th was when Mandela was released. In Angola, the People's Liberation Movement for Angola, there was a socialist sort of group. The CIA funded groups against them to shut them down. And when Nkrumah was out of Ghana for, I forget what the reason was, but when Nkrumah was out of town, essentially, they overthrew his government, right? So the CIA has like a very specific
history in Africa.
Right. And then so to see us rooting for T'Challa and his ally, the CIA, especially when T'Challa is like, yes, you can kill my people, that is
a problem.
It's a problem. And because it's specific propaganda.
And in terms of your support of media literacy, it's like, that's why we need that, so that we can read those things and understand that just because there's black people on screen doesn't mean that there's some other agenda that's being pushed. Which in this case is really rehabilitating the image of the CIA in Africa. Right.
But also, if you look at Killmonger, it's very carefully constructed because what's her name? Lupita Nyong'o's character,
Nakia,
suggests that Wakanda should help other people. Like, we can't look at all of this suffering in the world.
Yeah.
You know, and so Nakia's a spy, so she goes all over and she's spying on people, and so she sees other cultures and people that are hurting. Wakanda has been traditionally isolationist, as we talked about earlier, because of Make Wakanda Great Again and stuff like that. So Nakia says we should be helping other people, right? That's what Killmonger's saying. Killmonger, who is Wakandan American, is like, yeah, why am I fucking suffering in Oakland? But there's a whole, you know, when black people around the world have been trying to rise up and gain their freedom, we haven't had the means and the firepower and the numbers to do it. And that here you guys are hiding behind a fucking wall.
Force field, yeah.
A force field wall. And it's like, you could have liberated us, right? And so to see Killmonger positioned as the bad guy when he's talking about like helping other people, it's imperialistic, right? You should use your army to go to these other and Killmonger was even like, yeah, we should rule the world,
yeah,
right? Yeah. And it's like, but that is the position that T'Challa ultimately takes in a softer form with Nakia. So at the end of the movie, he's like, yeah, let's open up a Wakandan outreach center in Oakland where Killmonger was raised and all of this. And let's go to the UN and just give our vibranium out like fucking candy. And that is America's ultimate sort of neo-colonial goal, is instead of having to hire death squads or CIA overthrowing the... Right, and so T'Challa is a... So, okay, Fanon.
African imperialist.
He's a comprador.
What?
A comprador, which is essentially, it's not exactly a puppet government, but it's kind of like in the neo-colonial age, where it's a government, like an American-backed government that just siphons off its own resources. So, like, the compradors are getting paid, the people suffer.
Oh,
but,
Nigeria.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like when Fanon talks about the revolution in Right Side of the Earth, when you've overthrown or you've ousted the colonizer, whether that's France or the Dutch or America or England, whoever, as you're trying to restructure, the businesses of those countries are going to come in and say, hey, we'll help you. And they're going to prop up certain people that are greedy to siphon off natural resources. So it's like, it's not a hardcore, like the military.
Right.
Is
it's shell in the Delta state of Nigeria.
Exactly. Yeah. And because we're rooting for T'Challa, right, we're actually rooting for...
Our own demise.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then so that's what's dangerous about the Black Panther as a movie, is that it supports America's colonial project and it rehabilitates the CIA's involvement in Africa.
African governments.
Right. Because what would have happened is Killmonger would be sort of an anarchistic sort of like... It's weird because he's not anarchist, like he's not left politically, Killmonger is, but he's like a caricature of socialist leaders, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So like, these are all of your fears about a socialist leader. And I was even reading, and it was a conservative who saw an advanced screening of it, so take that with a grain of salt. But he said the villain is a Black Lives Matter terrorist, like straight up. Killmonger. And I read that and I was like, no, and I was like, oh, he is actually. Like, okay. So it's interesting that the right it's an incorrect reading, but they have a better understanding of what's going on than Black people.
So let me just say this. Thanks for ruining everything.
You're welcome.
So I'm somewhere in the middle of all of this, because I'm hearing this and like I'm butthurt. Like, oh, I don't want to hear all this stuff. I want to just revel in the first black superhero movie.
But that's what they want you to do.
No, I understand. Let me finish. I understand that. Yet hearing this also helps to understand that, right, there is underlying things that move beyond the film that will definitely get advanced. And then what Black people as a whole are left with is this good feeling. Like, it can be sort of like a ripoff or an unfair deal because we get a good feeling about a studio-supported film with these great talented actors and craftsmen and technicians that came together and got to make art on a high level, right? That is also commercially viable, right?
I wouldn't call it art, but okay.
That's why it's commercially viable entertainment. But on the flip side, if you read into the film, then it's supporting things that do not advance any actual change in terms of not just how we're looked at, because cool if a kid's like, now I want to be Black Panther for Halloween, but understanding what, how we've got to this place. Right. And I mean, I feel like it's like, yeah, people don't want to hear that because that's a bummer and a buzzkill. But at the same time, though, that's important because, in the most simple way, that's why in terms of looking at films, I have to remind myself to just not get too hyped because it is just a movie. After I see that movie, it's sad because, like with Star Wars, I left the movie going, oh, well, that's over. Right. And now I'm just going to wait for another 18 months until I can get hyped about it to see it, and then that's over.
Well, because the thing about Star Wars, and I'm just going to interject here, is that the Empire is the United States of America. Like, if you were going to read it and apply it to the real world, the Empire would be America, or back in the day, England, and the rebels would be, freedom fighters around the globe trying to stop the Empire's reach. But if you look at the promotion of the films, like I remember when The Force Awakens came out, there was a Navy commercial, and it's like you see the aircraft cruiser, and it literally looks like a Star Destroyer, and it's just like, we are, fighting against the Empire, and then it has like an X-wing flying over it, and it's like that. No,
what
that
Empire?
That is
they are the Empire,
exactly. Oh, but okay. That's the way that they manipulate, is because it's such a black and white, good and bad sort of mythology, and America always positions itself as the good guy, even though it's not, so that you wouldn't notice the similarities between that aircraft cruiser, and a Star Destroyer, because it's a black white. And so America's whole thing about the terrorists over there and we're the good guys and is the same thing about the good side and the dark side of the Force.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so even though it's not in Star Wars itself, it's in the promotion around it.
So this actually just goes into more of the thing, because I know, like a lot of people, they won't want to hear that, but at the same time, that is necessary to move forward. Now, just quickly, how would you go about promoting more media literacy?
That is,
or a better understanding of what media literacy is, because I feel like, in the very least, I didn't know the word or the phrasing, but I just understand that, I'm interfacing with entertainment, and as much as I want to feel good by watching the entertainment, there's always underlying suggestions beneath it.
So teaching media, it's a whole, because the thing about that is that it has to be integrated into the public education system. Okay. But the public education system doesn't have money to teach math and English. Yeah. But right. So it's really hard to do, but I know a lot of community centers do media literacy stuff. We talked about the Academy doing media literacy, which but so now it's it could be very localized and things like that, but it needs to be a widespread thing, because we don't understand that constantly we're being advertised to. And there are examples of girls who think that it is, for example, anti-feminist to be against makeup, because it's definitively feminine, right? So you hate women if you're against makeup, because the makeup companies are pushing products about, it's like Jessica Chastain and fucking Maybelline or some shit saying, I'm a strong, powerful woman, and the Rosie the Riveter pose and all of this shit, so that you can buy products. Yeah. It's not about empowerment or anything. Sure. Anytime it's Like the Pepsi.
She's a star people identify with.
Right.
They will listen to her
Right.
and buy more makeup.
Right, but they're using it in a feminist way because they're going on the hype of the movement.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to sell a product.
Right.
And so now we're seeing the effects of makeup on little girls has been like I think since like the 70s or 80s there have been studies coming out about like how in terms of self-esteem and all of this and wearing them down, but now the studies are showing that because of commercials and because of empowering women and that sort of thing, they're actually saying that no, we can't be progressive women if we don't wear makeup. We have to wear makeup. We have to buy these products. We have to do right. That's how fucking cynical it is. And so that's the importance of media literacy, is that to recognize they're just trying to sell me some shit. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. Right? So something on like that basic of a level. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But then when we get into like Transformers and Black Panther and all of these movies, to see how the United States government, specifically its intelligence agencies and armed forces, are using our entertainment when our critical faculties are kind of shut off to give us basically what America's doing is great.
Yeah.
Right? Taking over African countries, you know, bombing the hell out of Afghanistan, killing children. That's all fine. That's great. We need Guantanamo Bay. Yeah. Right? So that's the importance of media literacy. I would teach it, if I was teaching like kids, I would teach them to rewrite their favorite stories. Because we take the text as king, which is why when an adaptation of a book happens, everybody's like, well, this is not as good as the because the text is king.
Dark Tower.
Right. But if we learn like with fan fiction, and then there's a whole thing about like pornography and fan fiction and like weird shit going on there,
yeah.
Like 30-year-old adults like writing about SpongeBob fucking Squidward or whatever. But yeah, but to teach kids that if your favorite character dies in a movie, like if
Bambi.
Who?
Bambi.
Right, you can rewrite it so Bambi survives or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So like, I didn't like the way that this fight scene went, so I'm gonna rewrite it. I think that is important as like a basis to like show that the text can be investigated and it can be rewritten, and it doesn't have, things don't have to happen the way that they have to happen in the film. It's not overdetermined that they have to happen like that, because it's something that people are making. And you're making with this intention, they're making with that intention. So I think that's like a very good starting base. But it's hard to teach children, oh, this is the history of colonialism and this is why you shouldn't watch Black Panther. You know what I mean? Like,
right, yeah.
Because then you have to bring in politics and history, and then like...
And also, then it's like, I'm not going to listen to you. Black Panther looks fun.
Right.
You're an asshole.
Right. But if you start them by investigating the texts, right, like by rewriting texts and stuff like that, then by the time they get to like middle school, high school, and into college, with their history classes and stuff like that, I mean, and again, this is completely revamping the entire educational system.
Good luck with Betsy DeVos.
Right, I know. But so some of the books, I've pulled them about the military and CIA involvement in movies. Hollywood's War Machine, U.S. Militarism and Popular Culture by Carl Boggs and Tom Poland. Real Power, R-E-E-L, Power. Hollywood Cinema and American Supremacy by Matthew Alford. Operation Hollywood, How the Pentagon Shapes and Censors the Films of Hollywood by David L. Robb. And The CIA in Hollywood, How the Agency Shapes Film and Television by Tricia Jenkins are, I think, four of the most common and off-cited books about
Media
how...
literacy and...
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not media literacy. How the United States government uses Hollywood as a propaganda machine.
Okay. So everybody should check those books out. And watch Black Panther, but watch it with, you know...
I mean, it was a solid... It was an averagely made film. And as far as films go in the current era, that's great.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break and come back with our dessert.
A pass on us. You think you can cross over to the mainland and run away from it? Never forget who we is and how far we done come.
And we're back with our dessert, which is the New York Times 28 Days, 28 Films for Black History Month by Manhola Dargis and A.O. Scott. And we're pairing that with
Armand White's response to that, which is a better than black list. The New York Times rewrites film history to fit a liberal bias. Here's my course correction that he wrote for the National Review.
Armand White.
Yep.
The worst of the worst.
Listen, he is iconic.
Okay. So anyway, on the 28 Days of 28 Films list,
The New York Times one.
Yeah, the New York Times one basically is like, hey, if you watched a film a day for Black History Month, we can walk you through the black cinema of the 20th century. And it's cool because it starts out in the 20s with an Oscar Micheaux film called Within Our Gates, and it moves all the way down the line to The Watermelon Woman, directed by Cheryl Dunye in 1996.
Yep. So Armand's article. Okay, well, first let's talk about the New York Times article, because Armand's is like a point-by-point refutation of each movie. He said, instead of this movie, you should watch this movie. Instead of this movie, you should watch this movie. But in terms of the New York Times one, with any canon, it's going to be limited. And there are some obvious hitters, like Within Our Gates, which was the response, which is the so-called black response to Birth of a Nation. It has Daughters of the Dust, right?
She's Gotta Have It.
She's Gotta Have It.
Losing Ground, Kathleen Collins' only feature film before she passed.
Killer of Sheep is in there. So like some of the more...
Surprisingly, though, it also has the Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor film Stir Crazy.
Yeah.
Which I did not know was directed by Sidney Poitier, but they were a great duo. Like every comedy they did.
So it has different like genres. There's some documentaries in there. There's some concert films in there, musicals, dramas.
Madeline Anderson's documentary work. They have I Am Somebody.
Yeah, Zora Neale Hurston's fieldwork.
Which is incredible to actually watch.
It is. So, Armand White's response, he's talking about basically all of these films are the liberal response to black people, where they want to see black people that are like, you know, oh, woe is me, victimhood, this and that. So, he's offering films that don't do victimhood. And here's some highlights that I think are hilarious. You shouldn't watch Within Our Gates. Instead, you should watch Birth of a Nation. Because Birth of a Nation is important to film history and Within Our Gates is not. It's a good film, but it didn't set the course of film history. Now, you know my thoughts on Birth of a Nation.
It's a trash film.
It is the film that destroyed the possibilities of the future of film. It is not the film that laid the foundation for film as we know it. It is the most detrimental film in film history because it killed all of these other languages and ways of doing film. And we've been stuck with the same fucking bullshit forever.
It's funny too. Oh, well, continue the list.
Then we talked about Zora Neale Hurston's Fieldwork, which has the only moving footage of what we think of or what we know in terms of like the paperwork of the last African brought to our soil, which is Cudjoe Lewis. Instead of watching that, you should watch a documentary about Ida B. Wells, which has no historically important footage ever, like in it. Like, it's a great documentary. It's, you know, learn about Ida B. Wells, who's, you know, an important historical figure, but doesn't have historically like relevant, you know what I mean? Like that Zora Neale Hurston's footage needs to be preserved. This Ida B. Wells documentary you could read in a book. You know what I mean? Instead of watching Killer of Sheep, watch the generic, terrible, bland version of Raisin in the Sun. Instead of Daughters of the Dust, because that's stuffy and for pseudo-intellectuals, watch Beloved by...
Steven Spielberg?
No, that was Amistad.
No,
that was he did Amistad in Color Purple. It was by not Michael Mann. Oh my God, they're brothers and he died. Demi.
Tony Scott.
Some white man. Watch that as opposed to the genre.
Wait, Tony Scott did Beloved?
Yeah. It was Tony Scott or one of the Demi brothers. I can't remember, but some white man.
I don't think it was Tony Scott, dude.
It was some white man. Stop belaboring the point. Some fucking white man.
Okay. A white man made.
As opposed to the genre-defying, historically epic, very culturally specific, in terms of cinematography, like
And
next
art,
level,
Carrie Jane
like
Marshall.
right ahead of its time, fucking film. Let's go with the generic stock, the Hollywood boohoo cry beloved, a version of the Toni Morrison novel, right? And for gay people, Patrick Ian Polk, who's famous for Noah's Ark on Logo TV, which was I think their first scripted TV show, which was interesting because it was a black TV show. He directed a film called The Skinny, which stars Jussie Smollett, who is in Empire, and he's doing his thing over in Empire. And it is terribly written. It is terribly shot. It's just all around a terrible movie. Watch that movie instead of Tongues Untied, which is again, genre-defying. It's documentary, but it's almost like a vlog. But then it's this cultural expression of queer black people, directed by Marlon Riggs. And it's just like, dog, I don't understand. Yeah, but I think it's important. The impulse behind this is kind of two things from Armand. One, you should investigate the canon, right? That's always a good thing to say. We should reevaluate the legacies of these films, right? But because he's saying specifically that I'm trying to introduce you to more conservative black films, that's kind of like, you lost me.
Okay. Investigating
the canon, yes, but saying that, you know, all of these films are victimhood films, which they're not. That certainly isn't. Even though Marlon Riggs is about AIDS and how there's sections of that where he's persecuted as a black man and a gay man, it's still not like I'm resilient because of this. It's not, I'm a victim, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So his premise is faulty, and if you're going to say, instead of this film, you should watch this film, you have to make sure that the film that you're saying to watch instead is at least good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Here's all I know about Armand White. He hates black people. So, you know, wasn't really gonna...
Right. No, I know.
Yeah.
I just thought it was off. Like, reading some of like what he wrote, it was just like...
Very
dude.
shady. Very shady.
But he's iconic because of that. Like, maybe not in a good way he's iconic, but he definitely has opinions and he stands by them, and they're wrong, and he is convinced that he's right, and that is what an icon is. Can't tell me nothing.
Cool.
Yep.
So that's the end of this episode.
It is.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe and look at the past episodes if you're joining us for the first time. You can find us on Instagram at eatin.niggas. And you can find me on Instagram at itzebra11 or Twitter itzebra. And Rory, where can we find you at?
You can find me on Instagram at rem_blues, REM_BLUES, and on Instagram at remblues without the underscore. And we're on SoundCloud, and we probably should get a Twitter too.
Yeah, we're gonna work on that. Yeah.
But see you next time.
Yes. Peace out.
Red light, green light, red light, green light, red light, green light, red light, green light, fast cars.